Okay, so this video is going to be about being unproductive, which I know sounds kind of ridiculous, but I got this idea from the last video I did. And basically, it's not just about being unproductive, it's about being wasteful and how wastefulness is actually a good thing sometimes. And this is just a wisdom that I've had, and sometimes people think that everything has to be cut cornered, everything has to be sort of efficient, you know? But sometimes wastefulness is not only an improvement or better, but it's actually necessary. And this is a wisdom that for some reason has escaped us in the modern times. Right? We always hear these mantras, and it's weird how I'm kind of on a roll here, just kind of dispelling things that people normally say. But the reality is wastefulness is essential in experimentation. It is essential in learning new things. Just as when you are learning something new, right? You know, kids are, the younger people, when they're in school, right, they have to practice. And how do they practice? You practice in school by making mistakes, right? And so you go through drills, and it's the same thing. And that's wasteful, is it not? Isn't it wasteful to be throwing all that paper away? And but you do this in the adult world as well. But the problem is, so many people in the adult world, they don't see it that way. In fact, they try to save as much money as possible without realizing that sometimes in order to save money, you have to spend money. And this is a different concept, but this applies to learning as well. So in learning, do not be afraid. So this is, if you want to study, right, and learn more about studying, you want to study a topic, don't be afraid to be wasteful. Don't be afraid sometimes going all out and not only being wasteful with your time, because technically it's wasteful to if you spend all day thinking about a problem, that seems like a waste, does it not? It's kind of a waste of time, but you're spending that extra time. Sometimes it's worth it to really get, especially if it's a difficult topic or a difficult problem, so that it gets ingrained into your mind. And likewise, other activities as well, like not just solving problems, but even when it comes to supplies, and even on a macro level, right? Like, in other words, institutions should not be afraid to be wasteful if it helps with safety, for example, right? So like, don't be afraid to use napkins, right? If you work at a restaurant or something, don't be afraid to have plenty of napkins for people, even if you're going to use them. Don't be stingy with it, is what I'm saying. Sometimes you need to have plenty of supplies of something, right? Or let's say you are a better analogy, or another analogy would be like another idea would be if, let's say you're learning something, to not be afraid to buy extra supplies or to use them, or because sometimes you buy something and you don't, it's almost like you feel like you don't want to use it. Have you ever done that? Like, you buy a notebook and you're like, oh, I don't want to. It's like I used to have this issue where you try to be, you try not to. You try to be very careful about how many pages you use and how, and you let that fear get in the way, when sometimes you need the freedom of wastefulness, the freedom to throw away things without having to think about or take into account what you're doing, and that has value. That has value in terms of time, because you can think, and also because it'll actually encourage you to try out new things once you are not afraid to be wasteful. And so sometimes you have to spend the extra money. Sometimes, and this is a wisdom. I wish that businesses would understand this more, in schools as well. And so in that sense, I mean, if you want to take this even further beyond just the physical stuff, right? I talked about the unproductivity, and what do I mean by that? unproductivity is a good thing. So you don't always, in fact, productivity is not always a good thing, because unproductivity can be good too. Because let's say if sometimes you don't want to be productive, sometimes having that time to relax or having that time to do something tedious, which you might think that's not productive, right? Imagine if you were working on a problem and you were painstakingly kind of doing something that you normally wouldn't do, right? Normally you want to try to be as efficient as possible, but maybe you want to take the time to be inefficient, to do things the long way, right? Imagine doing a math problem the long way, or doing something. And I think it's because there's value in it. There is an inherent value in, sometimes it's worth, in order to learn something or in order to discover something, sometimes you need to go take the scenic route. And that's what I mean by unproductivity being a good thing. You don't always want to be productive. Sometimes the unproductivity can be what allows you to discover and to it gives you the time to spend. Of course, yes, there's a time, there's a time to be efficient, and there's a time to be, obviously you're going to be efficient when you need to, or a time to optimize. But sometimes there is value in unproductivity as well, and wastefulness, and it's not talked about enough. When people say you always have to be efficient, to me, life isn't like that. It rewards the experimenter. It rewards the person that plays. And in a way, if you look at how young people live their lives, the younger people, they are very unproductive, actually. They spend a lot of time playing around. That's basically what playing is. It's just pure unproductivity. But yet playing helps, Now, I don't necessarily mean playing literally, of course, when it comes to studying or work. But although that also can be a good way to let off steam. But I'm looking at it more in the terms of being productive with unproductivity, I guess, if you want to think of it that way. In other words, that there is a value that if a company or if a school decides to do something that is unproductive, the opposite of what you would think people should do, it actually can be a boon, because it can inspire you. It allows you do things in a long and drawn out way. Instead of doing it fast, which would be the efficient way, the productive way to do it the unproductive way, right? Go out of your way to do it differently. Like do it how you normally wouldn't do. And this is why you need kind of a budget. You need enough of a budget so that you can be a little wasteful like that. But a lot of companies, they don't think that way, and yet they should, in my view, because, like I just said, that's how the discoveries happen. That's how people learn what you can or can't do. That's how you learn more about what you're doing. And sometimes that unproductivity, that wastefulness, can be how you learn. Like it's just like playing in a way. The necessity play is how we discover, how we learn new things, how we create new things, how we optimize. And in fact, by being wasteful, you can sometimes experiment and try different things and see which works best. That is wasteful. That's actually how experiments are made. That's how, what they call R&D, right? Research and development. It's all about, that's literally what it is. They take different things, they take different scenarios, they try them all out and see which one works. And that's wasteful. See, but at the same time, you need to do that with your life. Okay, try different things. Don't be productive. Be the opposite. Be unproductive. And don't try different things. Try something that you know is not going to work. Try something that maybe, try a different way of doing what you normally do. And you might just discover that, you might stumble upon a new idea. You might realize that actually it's faster if you do it the other way. Sometimes it's not intuitive, and you won't know unless you try it, which is ridiculous, because sometimes you dismiss things. When you see things, you're like, oh, that has to be the slow way of doing it, or no, that's probably not the good way, but you haven't tried it. So try it. And by trying it, you will be unproductive, and you're gonna have a lot of false starts. You're gonna waste money actually trying out new things. But at least now, when you do that, you will know what happened. And so, in a way, it wasn't a waste. See? And that's something that the average person wouldn't know. They wouldn't know because they didn't experiment the way that you did. But you did. So that's why try being unproductive. Try being wasteful and try introducing some of these concepts. I know a lot of these concepts are pretty big, but the message is still the same, that there is value in wastefulness and inefficiencies. And I wish people would understand that. And so, but yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can do this. But you can apply these same principles into your own life, right? Normally you would think of it in a corporate setting or in an educational setting, but really in a research, from a research point of view, but really you can apply these to your daily life as well. So yeah, that's what do you all think?